Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is that time of the summer where we start thinking about new signings, potential arrivals throughout the transfer window, which has not yet officially opened. And to help me go through tonight's episode is a familiar face, a familiar voice across the EFL. It's none other than Gabe Sutton. So first of all, welcome Gabe back to the channel for first appearance in what feels like absolutely forever. You have been on before a couple of times, but it feels like pre-COVID was the last time I actually saw you.
Yeah, it's been far too long, Matt, hasn't it? Yeah, looking forward to this. Always love the channel. So, yeah, glad to be on.
Appreciate your time as always. Right, let's get straight into it. Obviously, what I've done, Gabe, is gone through the Gills retained and release list. We're actually in a position for the first time in a few years where we've actually got the core, the basis of a very good squad to be working with to start with. We're not going to have to be bringing in ridiculous amounts of new arrivals. So I think it's a case of tweaking the squad, adding some quality to the starting 11 and padding out the numbers. But yeah, certainly the most exciting I've been for a summer transfer window for quite some time. So going to go through positions, certainly some that we need very pressingly, and some others where we might potentially move existing players around to then facilitate getting different players into the squad.
Do you know what, Matt? Before we go into this, can I sort of ask you about your thoughts about what the profile of player Gillingham have got to be looking at? Because I think some clubs can fall into this trap where when you've got one of the biggest budgets in the league, it's so tempting to always go for the 28-year-old that's won 2 promotions from this level before or played a few years, higher up the divisions. But I think sometimes that can be a bit of a trap because you want to also balance that with some youthful exuberance and bring some fresh energy into the team as well. So can I just get some overall thoughts from you on like the profile of player that Gillingham's are going to need?
Yeah, of course. And literally, we've just said that, haven't we, before we press record? I've said from my point of view, it's been very easy for the last couple of summers for Gillingham in terms of where I know we're going to be looking. And generally, that's been out of contract players, players that essentially other clubs don't want. Whereas now we can look at players that are out of contract but are potentially being offered deals by their clubs because we're in a position now where we can go and compete financially. We're an appealing prospect. So yeah, I've just said it. It's going to be difficult. You want to get people in that are proven at certain levels, but you also want to look to, maybe 18 months, 24 months down the line. Because if 23, 24 does go well, you don't want to then have to restart again for either another promotion tilt in League Two or, dare I say it quietly, very quietly, League One, which would obviously be the big aim. I think we've got to be looking at, the playoffs for the new season, but that doesn't mean that that's guaranteed. There's big clubs
How
in
many
there,
additions as well, just to get bearings before we go into this, do you think
I
Gillingham
think,
are going to need?
I think I've got listed, there's 18 under contract, but that includes Joe Bode and Josh Chambers, who are both still very young. So there's a chance they'll probably go B team, which we're looking at getting sorted. It looks like it's going to be done for the new season. So there will be like another stepping stone between youth football and the first team now, which Neil Harris has spoken about ever since arriving 18 months ago.
5 or 6 then, do you think?
I think it depends. We've still got Alex McDonald and David Tatonda under discussion, but I think the time that's elapsed probably means we're not going to see them sign now. I think if they're going to be done, they'd have been done quickly like everyone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we've got positions that, like I've looked at right back, but I think we're well stacked. But if we move like a Robbie McKenzie to be another centre back, then you suddenly need a fullback. So I think we'll probably talk about more players than we'll essentially sign. But yeah, I think in terms of numbers, you're probably looking at, you say 16, half a dozen gives us 22. I'm always a fan of having 2 per position, which would be that on average. And then you can pad it out with the youngsters if need be, if injuries and suspensions inevitably do arrive.
So 5 or 6 of quality then, I think, is
I think so. I think
roughly
that's what Neil's saying. He doesn't want to go mad and have a huge squad. I think he wants to run with a squad that's full of good players that, if one's injured or suspended, the one that comes in is not at detriment to the quality of the 11. I don't think we're going to be running with, I can't see it's going above 23, 24. I mean, there's some promising youngsters. So I'd say, yeah, half a dozen would be ample, unless injuries occur during pre-season, of course. Then it does change. But at this stage, yeah, half a dozen.
That makes sense. All right, let's crack on with it then, shall we?
Because we've got about 150 players listed, it feels.
We want all of them.
And I will say, Gills fans and fans of other clubs, if you are watching, it's just taken a long time. And I know you might not agree with me. In fact, I know most of you will disagree with me. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm in the know and these people that I'm listed are going to be arriving, but it does take a lot of time, and Gabe knows that as well because he covers the
Sure.
whole of the football league rather than just one club. But
Oh God, I can't tell you how many times like an opposing team signs a player and there's a fan that goes, "That's a sign that we're getting things wrong.
yeah, it does
Why aren't
happen.
we
Yeah,
signing that player?" It's
exactly. I think Alex Gilby's probably been one of the most recent ones looking at social media and
oh my
Stevenage
God.
fans over the last day or so. Right, let's start at right back because that's the way I've
Hmm.
listed it, so it makes it easiest. I've picked a couple out. We've had a chat on WhatsApp a couple of times as well because I do like to lean on you for your knowledge. Like I say, I'm like to think I'm fairly knowledgeable about my own football club, but when it comes to the Championship, League One, and League Two, and further beyond, then Gabe is one of the best about. Um, First one we've gone for is Tenai Watson.
Yeah.
26 years old, just been released by MK Dons. Obviously, they've been relegated into the same division as Gills, so you might at face value go, why? Played 34 times last season. Gabe obviously didn't score any goals, but that's not his job. 1 assist, played 79 minutes per game on average, 6 yellow cards, 10 clean sheets. Can play either side as well, so adds that versatility. What would Tenai Watson bring to Gillingham if he were to eventually be seen holding the scarf with the Raynham end in the background?
Well, he's very quick and strong, and I think he's great in the recovery from what I've seen. I whenever I sort of look at a Neil Harris team, I like to look at the template of teams he's had previously, and I look at maybe the 17-18 Millwall side as kind of a rough template. I know you sometimes like to play 4-2-3-1,
Mhm.
but there he had one really sort of athletic fullback in Malin Romeo. And to my eyes, Tenai Watson isn't dissimilar to that stylistically. I think he's someone who can drive up the flank, but he can also get back really quickly. And like you're right to say, he was part of a relegated MK Don side. I would suggest maybe one of their better players, though. And he was also part of an MK Don squad that got to 89 points in League One the year before. So let's factor that in. So
Of course.
yeah, for me, I think Tenai Watson would be a great signing.
Excellent stuff. Interesting. You mentioned Marlon Romeo. Yeah, obviously former Gills as well. Released as a kid and went on to great things, to be fair. But, we're not the first and we won't be the last club to let one slip through the net, unfortunately. Second option we put down as I've done it like pick an alternative. So we do the alternative now, which is a player that actually enjoyed a loan spell with Gills back in 2017 before going back to his parent club at the time, which is Sheffield Wednesday. He then went and played for Oxford and Burton. He went north of the border to Heart of Midlothian. Talking about Sean Clare, again, good age, 26 years old. He's been released, somewhat surprisingly, I might say, looking at it at face value from the outside, by Charlton Athletic. He played 49 times in League One last season. So again, if you looked at that at face value, you think, why has he been released? They finished halfway up, which is probably not where they want to be. But 1 goal, 2 assists, again, good average minutes, 77 minutes per game, which means that he's not missing much football.
Mm.
Um, 13 yellow cards. So developed a bit of an edge to his game, I'd say, since last being in Kent. 10 clean sheets for the Addicts. Versatility as well, which I think stands out. You need players that can sort of tick a lot of boxes, I think, at this level, Gabe. And he can
Yeah.
play right side of midfield. I think he's even played as like a right-sided centre-back on occasion for Charlton in
Yeah,
the
I think he
previous
can play
run.
in central midfield as well. So
Yeah, that's where
yeah,
we tended to play him when he was here a few years ago. Obviously, his game's developed since then. But yeah, Sean Clare, what would you make of that one?
yeah, I think he'd be very strong. He's probably not going to be as quick as Tenno Watson, I wouldn't imagine, but I think he's going to be pretty good on the ball as well. So he's probably going to have that dimension to it. So and yeah, I think for someone that's played the number of games that he has in the division above, I think to bring that kind of player into League Two, I think could be a real coup. So yeah, I would definitely be behind that one. Him or Watson would be a great addition.
Yeah, I'd be certainly very happy if it had to be one or the other. I wouldn't be disappointed. The only other one I've written down, but it's not one that I want to talk to in too much depth because obviously there's a lot of positions to get through, and I'm conscious that we don't want the episode to be so long. Um, was Joel Senior? I've not seen a lot of him until the playoffs and the back end of the season, where I started taking more notice of games as a fan without the
Hmm.
pressure of having to worry about Gills being relegated anymore. I thought he was very impressive in the playoffs, Joel Senior. So I was quite surprised to see that he'd been released, especially only being 23 years old. I know geography would be a big ask maybe at
That
that
that's
age to bring him all the way down. But in terms of his playing ability, was you a bit shocked to see him be released, or maybe just the
yeah.
step up might be a bit much?
Yeah, a little bit surprised. I suppose with Carlisle, they had Finn back at right wing back or right back for the first half of the season. and then second half of the season it's more been Jack Ellis. And actually Senior's had a long-term injury that's kind of kept him out. And actually all credit to him for finishing the season as well as he did and playing well in the playoffs. But I think that point about geography could be a bit of a stumbling block. Wouldn't necessarily be irretrievable, but you wonder whether Gillingham would need to make a few more commitments to make that one happen. Whereas I'd probably look at a Tenai Watson or a Sean Clare and probably maybe lean towards those options. But yeah, well done to Senior because he's come back from injury very well.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, played a big part over the last few games in getting them over the line at Wembley. And it was, yeah, just on a bit of a side note, it was great to see Thomas Holy actually be a bit of a hero and yet was still so humble that he tried to deflect all the attention onto the other teammates because he said they'd run around a bit more, bless him. Right, we
Lack
move.
of work rate, I reckon, from Thomas Holy.
Yeah, I don't think he gets about the pitch as quick as others, let's put it that way, judging just by the frame of the bloke. But yeah, to save a penalty in the shootout and ultimately be the hero was great to see because I think he took a bit of stick after leaving us and going to Ipswich and certainly at Cambridge and Port Vale. But yeah, great to see. Anyway, we don't need a goalie. Centre half. This is a player that I've watched twice against us, and I think I've been very impressed. I did a blog piece a couple of months ago, and said about 5 potential players that were good against us during the League Two season. I know you didn't have to be that great to look good against us for the first 4 months
Not
of
in
the
the first
season.
half of the season.
No, especially if you was a defender and our goal scoring record. But the first name that I've got on the list is one that I did write about, and that's Priestley Farquharson. I know he's under contract negotiations with Newport despite being out of contract, but 26 years of age. He's made a really good step up from playing in Welsh football. Obviously, was the natural move was to go into the EFL, and it was a local move for him. He played 38 times last season, good in both boxes, which is a phrase that Neil Harris likes to use. Scored 5 goals, provided 4 assists, which is brilliant numbers for a centre half. Averaged 80 minutes per game again, so it's another one that's not missing loads of minutes because of injuries and or suspensions. Only picked up 4 yellow cards as well throughout the campaign as a defender, which is very, very impressive. Think he can play right back, but obviously, naturally, in terms of build and athleticism, he's a centre back. Tell us more about the young man.
Yeah, Priestley Farquharson's had a great season for Newport, especially since Graham Coghlan took charge. I think he's very strong at the basics, obviously very athletic, as you mentioned, can dominate his penalty area and pose a threat in that of the opposition. And when you look at defenders that Neil Harris seems to like working with, it probably is the ones that are threat in the opposition box, like, for example, Jake Cooper at Millwall. So yeah, I could certainly be behind that signing, and also he's got roots in Hitchin. I think he was Hitchin born. So not a million miles. Probably Gillingham would be closer geographically to him
Yeah,
than Newport,
I think it said
perhaps.
London on a couple of websites that I looked at. Yeah, so
Yeah,
an
well,
hour
I
away.
drill down to the details, Matt. But no, I think yeah, I think he's yeah, I think he'd be a great signing, and it probably would. It may make sense depending on his situation from a geographical perspective.
And this was where I had an alternative, and he went to Mansfield yesterday, and that was Bailey Cargill. So I had to quickly go through and have a look at some lists
Cross that one
again.
off.
Good signing, I think. Left
If he
footed
stays
centre.
fit, I think that's the
Yeah,
only
I think
question
that's been
really.
the trouble over the last year or so, but was certainly very highly thought of at Bournemouth as a kid. I think left us
Yeah.
and then went and made his debut against Man United.
Mm.
I've gone higher up, so you can tell me whether it's too ambitious. But this is a player that played under Neil Harris at Cardiff for a couple of seasons. He's just been released by Blackpool. He's 30 years old. So in terms of the balance of your centre back group, if we was to bring this player in, it would give us 2 that are in their 30s with him and Max Ema, and then we'd have the younger ones, Will Wright and Connor Masterson, who's recently signed permanently. I'm talking about Curtis Nelson, who, like I say, played under Neil at Cardiff for a couple of seasons not too long ago. Just been relegated out of the Championship into League One with Blackpool. I totally understand. I think there will be interest from higher up the pyramid. I think League One would probably be something that he can still go and do comfortably. But like we've said at the top of the show, we don't know what Gills are doing in terms of finances, what we can sell to these players in terms of a package, not just in terms of what they're going to earn, but in terms of what the project is for the next 3 to 5 years or that type of thing. 500 senior games, was very good at the likes of Plymouth and Oxford, was
Yeah,
decent at Cardiff for a while as well.
youngest ever captain for Plymouth Argyle as well.
Yeah, I think he was still
Um,
a teenager, wasn't he, when he was skipper?
yeah, exactly. Curtis Nelson. I think a fully fit Curtis Nelson is at least a top League One's centre back
Hmm.
and probably Championship level.
Hmm.
The issue that he's obviously had because he's got strength, he's got one-on-one defending ability, he's quick, good ball playing ability, almost everything you'd want. I think the one thing that he's really missing is sort of that reliability from a fitness point of view, because he had a long-term injury at Blackpool last season, and maybe he's had one or two other injuries previously in his career. So that would be the risk element. And I think when it comes to recruitment, you can probably afford to take one or two risks where it's like you're getting a player that you wouldn't otherwise be able to attract by taking that gamble on someone
Hmm.
staying fit, because if they're fit, then they're the best player in the league type thing. But you don't want to take too many of those risks. You don't want to take 3, 4, 5 of those
No,
risks,
of course.
because in the end, you end up with a quarter, half your squad out injured, and yeah, you can have problems. But I think if Gillingham have a group of centre backs that are otherwise really fit and reliable, and you're confident that you're going to get a full season out of them or close to that, then maybe Curtis Nelson is the type of risk that might be worth going
Which I
for.
think our centre backs would fall into that bracket. Maxima very rarely misses games. I think he's probably missed a handful because of dislocated shoulder. I mean, he's played
Yeah,
with a dislocated shoulder a couple of times, just popped it back in and got on. He barely gets sent off, Maxima. So there's the experience. Connor Masterson, I think, missed one game with concussion after coming back in. So no injury problems there.
mm.
No red cards. Will Wright, I know, was in and out of the side after
Can play
Masterson
right back as
arrived.
well. Will Wright can.
Another one who offers versatility as well, yeah. So, and he's not missed any games through injury, I don't think. So, yeah, it might
Yeah.
be one that we could potentially take a risk on.
That
The other
that that
names,
sounds good, because then if you've got that, if you've got or 3 or 4 really good centre backs that you'd be happy with, Robbie McKenzie, I don't even know if we've mentioned him. So if you've got a selection of really good, reliable centre backs, then maybe
jumping
you
ahead on
can.
my notes now, calm yourself down. That's the next two that I've put, because the other option is we could use Robbie McKenzie or Ollie Hawkins as a
Mm,
central defender. Then we don't have to go and look, because
yeah,
we've got three. We could have one in house that's right under our nose, and then we could go and buy another right back, or we could go and buy another centre forward, and we'll get to that later on. But yeah, there's certainly options within the squad that we could shuffle a couple about to accommodate other areas. I
yeah,
guess that all
definitely.
depends on what Neil and Kenny Jackett and Andy Hessenthaler are obviously looking at, which they're rightfully keeping
Yeah,
close to their
but
chest at the
then
moment.
from what you've said there, Matt, would you almost argue that it makes more sense to take a chance on someone like a Curtis Nelson and just hope that you could even get half a season out of him, or just take that risk in terms of he might get injured, but if he stays fit, he's going to be brilliant,
Hmm.
because you've got lots of. Whereas if you sign someone like Priestley Parker Harson, very good League Two centre back, but are they really a massive improvement on your Amers or your Mastersons?
That's it. I suppose you've got to gauge where
Yeah.
the relative ceilings are of the
Mm,
individuals, and I suppose on that sense, you'd say maybe then we take a punt on Nelson. We're not saying it's going to happen, of course, because
yeah.
Ema and Masterson were very good as a pair last season from the middle of January right up to the end of the campaign. So that if one of them doesn't start because Curtis Nelson is Curtis Nelson, if they're then stepping in, if he does pick up an injury, you're not going to lose the quality, certainly in terms of relativity of League Two level.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. Interesting. We move across to left back, and there's been a few. Obviously, like I say, David Tatonda is still in contract talks, but I can't see it happening. It just seems to be going on for too long.
Mm.
Lewis
And also,
Page,
I think if you're going to try, because let's not forget, long term, you're trying to aspire to build a squad that can win promotion from this level in the next couple of seasons,
mhm.
and also try and sort of establish yourself in League One, which is a long
Yeah,
term
which I think
ambition, I
has to
guess.
be the. I think that has to
And
be the, maybe not even long term, probably mid term, because
midterm, yeah.
essentially we are a League One club. I'd say that's where we spent the majority of our existence.
Sure. So if that's the midterm ambition, then is David Tutonda, with the best will in the world, going to quite be the one that's going to take you to that level?
David Tatonda on his day can be anything that he wants, Kate, but unfortunately, David Tatonda when he's not on his day makes me look like a decent left back. Um, Yeah, he's just one of them. I think there tends to be no in between with David. I think, and I love that he plays on the edge and he plays with a smile on his face, but he does have these massive lapses in concentration, which can ultimately cost you games. But he's certainly improved. Again, he's another one that with the better players and more competition got better as the season grew on. Lewis Page was the other one who I thought looked all right, but we just didn't see enough of him. And obviously, Neil Harris has decided that we're going to go elsewhere and look for something probably more reliable. And that's no disrespect to Lewis Page, but he's another one who seems to be built of glass, unfortunately, and has had loads of injury problems. There's no doubt in his quality.
Do you think you need two left backs or one?
Again, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've got Robbie McKenzie and Shea Alexander that can play both sides. We've got Will Wright can cover as right back if one of them gets injured. So it's trying to get to this average of 2 per position, but you don't always have to have 22 players to be able to do that. Yeah.
You don't want to over egg the pudding. Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
And there's also, we've got the youngster that we signed from Chatham midway through last season, who I'd imagine would go out on loan, that Ika Orji, who was at Chatham and got promoted again, who's, I think, very raw. I think Neil did say, a couple of people said they watched the Kent Cup final that was at Priestfield a few weeks ago between Chatham and Margate, and said that he looked some way off.
Which you'd expect.
But yeah, at 19 coming from that level, yeah, totally agree. So I'd imagine a loan for him again next season would be more beneficial. And if we can get this under 21/under 23 side up and running, then he's going to play plenty of games in that way as well.
That would be great for developing that pathway into the first team, wouldn't
it? Because
it would also allow you to run with a bigger squad as well, because you've got opportunities to.
That's it, because they get more games rather than just playing in-house fixtures and friendlies that I don't think really serve a purpose other than to get minutes into legs throughout the season. Kane Vincent-Young is the first option I've put on there. I know you spoke very highly of him. Again, it's another one that's had a couple of injury problems, but at his best, I would say would probably be one of the best about, certainly in League Two. Been at Colchester and Ipswich throughout his career, so
he's almost exactly like Curtis Nelson. He's a top League One fullback and possibly a Championship fullback when he's fit. But that's the big caveat. So
I'm pretty sure he scored the winner, Ipswich's first season back in League One, when they came to Priestfield. They won 1-0, and we were really good on the day and missed a couple of chances. And I'm sure he scored a header at the back post. He was playing right wing back that day.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
I just thought, what an absolute athlete! Like, looks almost built like a super middleweight boxer. Athletic, big, chiselled, gets about, long stride on him, just powerful. Just looks like a proper modern day fullback. But yeah, unfortunately, if you pick up wear and tear and that type of thing, it does have an effect on your game. But still played 26 times last season, which isn't a disaster. A couple of assists, but you can see where the issues are. He only averaged 46 minutes per game, so it's only a half. 9 clean sheets in them, so you're going along at sort of 1 in 3, despite not being a regular. I get that's in a very good Ipswich Town side that got promoted to the Championship. But again, it's another one for me, Gabe, that can play both sides. He's played 200 games, over his career. So 27 probably should have played a few more. But like you say, if you can get him anywhere near fully fit and at his best, he'd be one hell of a fullback in this division.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is that if you're signing Kane Vincent-Young to play left back, you probably are. It probably would tip you more towards bringing in 2 left backs rather than 1, because again, you can't sort of hang your hat on Kane Vincent-Young staying fit. So it would probably lean you more towards saying, let's bring in another one, or I mean, we've got. I'm gonna skip to your notes again, Matt. You've got Shane Ferguson. If you brought in him as a left winger, he could also cover at left back. So it's those kind of options.
That's it. That's all we're trying. I think that's the biggest thing at this level is you need lots of players that can play 1 or 2 positions, because invariably you don't see squads of 30 and that type of thing like you do in, the Championship, the Premier League.
Richie Wellens at Orient was very big on that, sort of having fullbacks that are good on both feet or can play either side, and wingers who can alternate and things like that. So yeah, I think that could be really important.
Yeah, so certainly one to keep an eye on. The other one we've got is a player that's been transfer listed or made available, whichever way you like to phrase it, by Peterborough United. And it's a thing that they do. I think if they enter the last year of their contract and they're not signing a new deal, they automatically become available. And it works for Dara McCantley. 400 senior games for Portsmouth, Newport and the Posh. 50 career assists, which is decent from fullback. If you're looking at 1 in 8, not bad for a defender. Played 32 times for the Posh last season as they reached the playoffs. 1 assist. Averaged around an hour per game. 11 clean sheets. I'm talking about Dan Butler.
I think he's just been a pillar of consistency in the lower leagues across his career. I don't think he'll ever be the most sort of explosive fullback in the world, but I feel like when he plays, you kind of know what you can expect from him, which is good positional discipline, supports play well from behind, good
So
link-up
would
play.
he almost, just to interject, if say we had a Kane Vincent Young type on the right hand side and then a Dan Butler, the balance would be quite good because
Mm.
Vincent Young would be the one that would get on trying to get into the final third and affect things that way, and then Dan Butler would be the one that tuck in, make you compact, and just be a proper defender,
That's a
which I
great
think you
point.
need. And it's like a Neil Harris type fullback, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. That really kind of comes into it because I think what Millwall Harris had, yeah, you're right. He had sort of the Mallow and Romeo type as that sort of flying right back, and then he had James Meredith as a left back who
Yeah,
was sort of neat and tidy and experienced and solid, and I think he may seem to like that sort of balance of
yeah.
qualities
It's
between the
almost where you
fullback.
say you've got two fullbacks, one can play in one half and one can play in the other half.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. That
So yeah,
that
it's
makes
fun.
a lot of sense. So yeah, I like the idea of Dan Butler and also having that championship experience even as well as League One. That is definitely the kind of signing that's going to help Gillingham bring in the quality that they need.
The other option we've got, and we've written that down as an alternative, is well, there's a few. We'll go through them slightly quicker, obviously, because it's the main ones that we want to concentrate on. But it's another Peterborough player who I think we were in for in January, but he ended up going to Swindon. That's Joe Tomlinson.
Mhm.
Didn't play loads of football last season. One
I
weird,
think
I was looking at his career stats, scored 11 goals in 40 games at Eastleigh in 21-22. For a fullback, that's astonishing. I don't know if he takes set pieces or he played slightly higher up, but still a kid, essentially. 22 is very young for a fullback. Be something to keep an eye on. Again, obviously, command a fee.
I tell
Um,
you what, Matt, he is super technical. I've seen him play a couple of times, one of which when he was on loan at Swindon from Peterborough. You know, gets up and down really well. Some of his passing is excellent, almost like a. I would have almost sort of looked at it as almost like a League Two Trent Alexander-Arnold in a way. I know that's an
we've got
interesting
Shay
comparison.
Alexander-Arnold already, so we don't need Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Well, exactly, yeah. He can be play on the other side, but yeah, I think his sort of long range passing is really good. And to be honest, I think he'd be further on in his career if it weren't for one or two long term injuries that he's picked up. And it's a bit of a theme, I suppose, so far, and it's really unfortunate for Joe. But in terms of does he have the technical or potential to be a fantastic fullback? Absolutely, he does. But again, you want to make sure that the blend of or the balance of the recruitment is right, that you don't over rely or don't go too far on injury prone players staying fit. But I think for Joe Tomlinson, if there is space to take that sort of chance somewhere, I think Joe Tomlinson could really be worth it because he's got huge potential.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just going through the squad list that we've got, the existing players, I think the only person that had a long-term injury that you'd call last season was Lewis Walker, who ended up being out from December till the end of the season. Aside from that, I don't think anyone missed a huge amount of games through injury.
Mm,
And Lewis Walker's was a kick to the kneecap that ended up tweaking a ligament, the outside knee ligament. Which so again, it's not something he broke down because he's not training properly or he's not doing things
mm.
correctly. So again, I think if you look at the basis of our squad in terms of injury records amongst those players, I think we're all right to start with. So then I suppose it gives you that little bit of leeway in terms of, like you said, you don't want to be doing too many, but taking a chance on one or two in terms of their fitness.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, that is left back covered. The only other two names I'd mentioned, one was because of the Millwall link, that's Scott Malone, and also Jack Bridge, I think we were linked to last summer from Southend, who I think can play a couple of positions as well. So there's
Malone would be a good option from that point of view of consistency if you want someone that's going to be really
yeah, I think he'd
reliable
be
over
like
the
the
course.
Dan Butler type, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
you'd need the marauder the other side to be the one that can affect things the other side of the halfway line.
Yeah, 100%. But he's been very consistent for Millwall in terms of sort of fitness and reliability and the ability to play 40 plus league games in a season and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So ticks a
100%.
lot of boxes for sure.
Absolutely. Right, let's move further forward. We're going to move into central midfield first. I think we played, because we had this chat at the start of, oh no, we had this chat January 31st. 2022, because I immediately sent you a message on WhatsApp and said, what can we expect? And you said Neil Harris play 4-4-2.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, he ended up playing a back three because of the players that he inherited that season. And then I think I messaged you again last summer. I said, he's playing 4-2-3-1. I said, he's not playing 4-4-2 at all. What are you talking about? Because that's what he did through pre-season. I think because we signed the likes of Jordan Green and Hakiba Delacune and that type of thing. And obviously the first half of the campaign was an absolute write-off. And I think it got to the point where Neil Harris was second guessing himself. So we was trying various things. But I think we settled on a 4-4-2, or at least a variant of it through the second half of the season. I think there were times when we were playing slightly square pegs in round holes in terms of Gills Lapsley. And I don't think Dom Jeffries is a natural winger as well, but I think he did a very good job because he's rangy and leggy and he's young and he can get up and down, and he provided that energy in wider areas to stretch games.
I've got a question for you, Matt. Do you
Mhm.
think it's possible Gillingham could operate with a diamond at times this season with Tom Nichols at the tip of it?
I think it's an option. But then again, we struggle. Then where do we get George Lapsley? But it's interesting you say that, because I think for the last couple of games of the season, I think there was that sort of experiment where we went 4-4-2 diamond or a 4-3-1-2.
Yeah.
Because we played Jaden Clark a couple of times from the bench, and then he started at Salford. And obviously everyone was like, we don't know where Jaden Clark plays coming out of Dulwich Hamlet. They've said there was talk of he can play wide, he can play as a 10.
Yeah.
And he sort of
Because
did a bit of
I'm
both.
thinking the stage Sean Williams is at his career. I don't know that he can do the running that's required in a 4-4-2, because the two central midfielders in a 4-4-2 have got to cover so much ground, and Sean
So this is
Williams
what
is now.
I think helped him, because we played a 4-4-2, but because we had Alex McDonald and Dom Jeffries as the wingers, essentially, they naturally tucked in without the ball. So then there was always protection. If, say, a Dieng had gone on a bit, then there was always one either side of Williams, so he was always protected that way. I
Yeah.
think it'd be a bigger risk if you played two out and out wingers that want to get into the final third and are not too interested in running towards their own goal. Then I think Willow might get exposed at 36, 37 years of age.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's certainly the personnel, even with what we've got to play the diamond. You could have Willow in front of the back four. You've got Timmy Dieng that can play from one side, Dom Jeffries, Lapsley could play as the 10, Nichols
Well,
could do that.
that's yeah, because I think if you can recruit players who could play sort of as a wide midfielder in a 4-4-2, but also play sort of wide in a diamond, if you like,
Mhm.
that gives you some flexibility within game,
Absolutely.
because you can have Sean Williams at the in central midfield, generally sitting, and then you could have a Timothy Dieng type that's really pushing on from there. And then you've still got the protection for Sean Williams because you've still
I
got
think
runners.
I think that's what Dieng did almost by accident when Ollie Hawkins got struck down by illness for the Stockport game, and then we stuck with it because we were so good playing without a focal point against Stockport. I think we was a couple of minutes away from winning the game, because we brought George Lapsley in. So we played Jeffries and McDonald from the sides, but obviously they knew to be compact out of possession. We then had Dieng next to Williams, and then we had Lapsley off of Nichols. So we sort of turned up to that game and thought, we're going to have to get it down here. We can't go long.
Yeah.
What Dieng and Lapsley did really well from goal kicks and free kicks deep in our box was they swapped. So that Lapsley dropped in and Dieng then became the Ollie Hawkins to get Tom Nichols in and around him, or, McDonald and Jeffries running from deep. So again, there was some flexibility there. I think we stumbled across it a little bit, but again, it shows that if we don't, excuse me, if we don't have Ollie Hawkins, we can still be effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd only improve with better players, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really interesting to sort of look into those options, because then that kind of informs us how do Gillingham then recruit, because do you recruit two out and out wingers? Do you recruit one out and out winger and one who can sort of tuck in a little bit? So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see.
It is, and even more so now, because I think that like I say, that Macca's is going to go elsewhere, unfortunately. So I'd say we probably need two of varying degrees of winger anyway. Anyway, centre midfield first. Tangent, love doing them. First pick, it's Peterborough again. It's a very nice retained list and very attractive, I think, to a lot of football clubs. It's a player again that's got Neil Harris links. It's a player that's got Gillingham links, having been on loan second half of last season. 27 years old, 33 appearances last season, 1 goal, 4 assists, averaged only 48 minutes per game. So it shows that he wasn't a regular. I don't think Darren Ferguson fancied him too much when he came into the club. Talking about Ben Thompson. I know
Matt,
you was very, very enthusiastic about this one if we could get it over the line.
I'm so enthusiastic about this, Matt. Literally each time you mentioned Peterborough in that, I was kind of hoping, I was hoping you were going to say Ben Thompson, because this is one that I really wanted to talk about, because um I think that his relationship with Neil Harris is clearly a really special one,
Mhm.
and I think for footballers. Of course, money is a factor, and Ben Thompson isn't going to drop down to League Two without a healthy packet. But at the same time, I think it's part there is an element of you want to work with a manager that sort of you trust and that you have a really good relationship with,
Of
and it
course.
feels like that's the case with Thompson and Harris. We saw what he did in the second half of last season and played a huge role in nearly keeping the Gills up in League One from what looked a hopeless position. And I think that possibly dropping down to League Two at a promotion candidate that would make him, possibly a star player that would be willing to build around him. I think that could be the right move for Ben Thompson as well, because he sort of had a couple of years with Gillingham and with Portsmouth where I saw him come to St Andrews and put in a 10 out of 10 performance at Championship level where he scored a couple of goals and was absolutely unbelievable that night. And this was going back a few years. His career hasn't quite gone on exactly
Mhm.
as he would have hoped since then. I think it's fair to say. Maybe injuries have been a factor behind that or whatever else. But I think in terms of ability, I think he's definitely potentially the best player in League Two. So I think if Gillingham could pull this one off, I think it'd be a huge coup.
Where would you see him playing though, Gabe? Because I think he's comfortable playing any of the central midfield roles. I think he can be a box to box eight. I think he's comfortable going. I'm not saying I'd want him to be as deep as Sean Williams all the time. And I
Mm.
certainly wouldn't put I'd say all right, I'd say he's not a protector or a shield. So I'd say, but he can definitely excel as an eight where he's box to box. So he can drive at opposition defenders. His passing range is good enough.
Yeah.
I think he can play higher up. Whether he can play as a 10 with his back to goal, maybe, maybe not. But in terms of technical ability around opposition box, I think he's got everything you want. So where would you say we could fit him in? Bear in mind, we've already got George Lapsley, and you're now trying to play Tom Nichols deeper. So we're going to have about
Mm.
7 attacking midfielders next season. If you
Yeah, and you play 4-4-2.
exactly, yeah. Although we don't sometimes, maybe.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? I think your instinct about wanting Ben Thompson as an eight, I think, is the right one, because um, I think as a 10, you actually miss out a little bit on what he can do dropping in as a link up man, if you like, as a sort of third man in midfield. And probably as a six, you'd probably restrict him too much. So I think it is going to be a case of finding the right role for him. Again, I would probably lean towards sort of somewhere between a 4-4-2 and a diamond, where you kind of have Sean Williams sitting, two runners on the outside of midfield, either wide in a diamond or wide in a flat 4-4-2. And then you kind of, because of that, you give Thompson a bit more of a free rein in midfield. Um, and the discipline comes from the wide men. So it would take a little bit of thinking about how you'd incorporate him. But I think if Gillingham will be willing to make those steps, then I think that could be repaid in bucket loads.
And the old adage, you can't have too many good players, can you, at the end of the
It's
day?
true.
Second option is a player who has been released by Charlton. Again, probably somewhat surprisingly given his age and not knowing where his ceiling can be. You
Mm.
might be able to tell me more. Played 45 times last season for the Addicts, scored 5 goals and provided 6 assists. So you're looking at 11 goal contributions, which is 1 in 4 from central midfield, which is not to be sniffed at. Average 64 minutes per game, 8 yellow cards, no reds. Has already played 150 times in his senior career. Um, I think got promoted. I know he wasn't a regular by any means then, but I think got promoted into the Championship with Charlton in 18-19.
Mm.
Lives up the road from Gillingham. I'm talking about Alvin Morgan.
Yeah, so I think with Alvin Morgan, you're looking at someone who could probably fill in the roles that I've just described in terms of maybe being a wide midfielder that tucks in. I think he could probably play as a central midfielder in a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 as well. But I think he's someone who's just going to do the simple things well, break up play, and then keep things sort of ticking over. He can be a little bit rash. Had a lot of yellow cards, I think, in his career, and
Mhm.
you can have a tendency to give away free kicks and things like that. But maybe that's an occupational hazard of the way he plays. But I wouldn't call him a sort of an out and out destroyer, defensive midfielder, because I think he can slot into different roles. And sometimes over the course of the season, you need someone who has that sort of versatility. So yeah, I think he could be a useful player that facilitates different systems.
Just interesting what you said about a wide player that tucks in. I think, and to me, you keep describing Dom Jeffries that we've already got, which is interesting because, like I said, he played that from the left-hand side in a 4-4-2 for a lot of last seasons, especially after the takeover, but was
Mm.
very good at tucking in and becoming compact without the ball to help us, be solid defensively if his team's turned over possession on us. So it might be that you're almost talking us out of having to sign Alvin Morgan or that type of player. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Ben Thompson would be the one of the two, but I wouldn't be disappointed if for some reason Ben Thompson went to League One or whatever and Alvin Morgan was an option. Got a couple of alternatives. One is obviously Kent Ball, was born up the road in Tunbridge, Wales, just been released by Swindon. But I think there's some sort of conjecture around whether I don't think he's based in Kent. I think he's been based in Wales for a long time now. There's no doubt in the man's ability. He scored against us after about 55 seconds at the county ground last season in that ridiculous 3-3 draw. 39 games, 10 goals, 2 assists, 75 minutes per game as well, which is good for this player because I think he's another one that was probably accused of being too injury prone early in his career.
Mm.
Johnny Williams.
I think he'd be one that fits into a 4-2-3-1, probably more than a 4-4-2 or
Mhm.
even the diamond formation that we've talked about. And I think that's where Gillingham have got to be quite careful about recruiting for a dominant formation. You can, of course,
Of course.
have other formations to go into, but I think it's important that you don't end up bringing in players that then don't fit into what you want to try and do.
No, that's probably why I've put him as an alternate rather than a first pick
Mm.
because we know that Neil probably wants to play 2 up top, and if we're going to play a 1 up top with 1 in behind, you've already mentioned we've got Lapsley, we've got Nichols that can do that anyway, so you don't need 3 that can play off of a striker.
Yeah, I think with Johnny Williams, he's certainly capable of being he has been a handy option in League Two, where you play him for 60 minutes one game, you bring him off the bench for 20 minutes in another, and just kind of give him sort of little and often kind of minutes, so that you don't sort of bombard him with too many games. But there's probably players at this level, like I think of Nicky Adams would be one.
Mhm.
I think probably Danny Mayer would probably be another where you just look at them and it feels like they think a split second ahead of other players at this level. And I
Sure.
think Johnny Williams has that. I don't think he's technically extraordinary actually, but I think it's just some of the way that he sort of weights his passes or even the shorter passes that are kind of through balls, the timing of them, it's just a little bit quicker than other players. So he can certainly bring that. And I think really sometimes that can have more impact sometimes off the bench if other players are a bit tired. He
Sure.
can sort of take advantage of that. So definitely capable of being a great signing, but you've also got to think about how much would we need to pay him to bring him into the club and do that? Does he fit into the
That's it, of course,
formation
yeah,
that we're
which is
recruiting?
which is why I wanted to get you on as well, because
Mm,
we all have to understand that it's not FIFA or Football Manager where you can just go, I've got a pot of money, I can go and buy players. It's more
mm,
complicated than that, and I like to think that we try to do that on this channel.
yeah,
Um, I just think he'd probably fall slightly for me into, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but probably the luxury bracket.
yeah, a
And
little bit.
again, if we the risk we have is if people go, oh, Brad Gallinton's taken over, they've got more money now.
Mm.
There's the fear of the people trying to take the mick, and I don't think
And the other
I
thing
don't think that
is,
will happen. But yeah, I
yeah.
think it'd be right player, but probably wrong system.
And if you think of Neil Harris's teams at their best, I think high line, high tempo, direct into a centre forward, follow it up with men in around him,
Mhm.
and then maybe play a bit of football from that standpoint. And I think that if you're trying to be really aggressive from the front, do you necessarily want too many players that are at the end of their careers where you're sort of getting the the last bits out of
Well, this
them?
was the thing
And
for me when I was doing the research, Gabe, because I had Johnny Williams down as being about 33. I didn't realise he was only 29. He feels like he's been around for
you're joking?
absolutely
He's only
forever.
29.
That's what it says. Yeah, that's on the
Uh,
website. I thought you dug
right.
a bit deeper than me.
Okay. No, I've you've got me out there.
Only when
No,
you know where they're
I'm
born. You
amazed
just
that he's
don't
only
know when they were
29.
born.
I would have guessed. I would have guessed more like 34.
That's
Okay.
what I thought. Yeah, I honestly thought he was early 30. I'm going to double check. I'm going to double check, unless I've read it completely wrong.
I bet Johnny Williams is going to be watching this and he's so offended.
He looks about 35, to be fair to him. Sure, he's not watching. If you are, Johnny, I'm only joking. Just cost him. It's not going to sign there. You watch some idiot on YouTube.
Right, that's it.
Johnny Williams. Johnny Williams. Jonathan Williams. Born 9th of October 1993.
Oh well, there we go. I stand corrected. Please accept my apologies, Johnny. I suppose let's
Tough paper
go.
round.
But let's go back to the bigger point for me, which is I don't think Johnny Williams's main strength is that he's incredibly aggressive and
No,
super. I don't think that's really his game. And I think maybe it's different system would probably suit him more.
that's it.
But
And in League
the
Two, can you
stamina,
sign a player just to be coming on for the last 20 minutes? Probably not.
yeah, the stamina that you're probably going to need to play in a Neil Harris team. Steve Morrison had incredible stamina. Lee Gregory, I just don't think he necessarily fits into that.
I'll add
So
him to the list. Has he been released? Oh, we haven't seen. I don't think we've seen Sheffield Wednesday's retained list yet, have
I
we?
would imagine they'll be wanting to keep hold of Lee Gregory. So I don't think that's.
It's very good in the playoffs, to be fair, as well.
Yeah, he put in a lovely cross as well for the winner.
Scored a lovely header for the Peterborough goal in the second leg as well.
Yeah.
The only other name I had down, I think this was purely because I thought he was very good when he came to Kent a couple of months ago and scored a really good goal against us. That was Calum Lee. I've not done loads of research on this one. It was just, I think, purely on instinct because he had a good game in ME7 when we beat him 2-1 back in March. But what would Calum Lee bring if we was to have a look?
Yeah, I think the feeling on Calum Lee at Crewe over the last sort of 7 years or so is that he was incredibly highly rated when he first broke through, and possibly even ahead of Charlie Kirk at one point, who ended up being part of that sort of golden generation, if you like, and getting a move to Charlton. But I think that Calum Lee, when he was maybe expected to continue to develop and improve every season,
Hasn't.
it just didn't really happen for him. And it felt like he sort of kept got one or two contracts that wasn't necessarily merited.
That was
And
probably my red flag, which is why I wanted to ask you, because you look at all the players that have come through that side in the last 7 years, and you've seen where they've disappeared to, and they've gone to the Championship, Perry and G, and that type of thing. And like you say, Charlie Kirk and others as well. There's been
yeah,
plenty. Whereas there has to be a reason why Calum Ainley stayed put.
yeah, I don't think again, let's revert back to what Gillingham are trying to aim for short, mid, long term. I don't think Calum Lee is quite going to take you to those places personally.
No, that's
So
fine. It was like I say, that one was more an instinct because he had a good game that night. But I
sure.
understand one
Yeah,
swallow
and
doesn't
listen,
make a
he's
summer.
capable of having sort of one-off good games, and hopefully he can get himself a good move that can help. Get him
But
on the right
you'd
track.
say you'd
Sometimes
hope for it that you'd hope Gills would be aiming a bit higher.
I think so. Yeah, with all respect to Callum.
Which brings me on nicely to our next position, which is right winger. And I saw that this retained list came out, and then the next morning I woke up and I thought, through sleepy eyes, I looked on Twitter, and Gabe Sutton was tweeting about this is a great move for Gillingham. This is a player that can really make a difference. And I was like, have I read this right? You were talking about Jordan Graham. Now I read it once and I read it again, and I thought, has Gabe had a drink? But then the more I think about it, I don't think it's as unrealistic as at first glance. This is a player that had very big injury problems earlier in his career. I think it's safe to say that he probably had his best season as a pro with Gillingham in 2021.
Yeah,
I think that the numbers were outstanding for a side that did flirt with the playoffs. I think it was 13 goals, double figures for assists in, I think, 40 odd appearances, which was some going. So you're looking at a goal contribution every other game, which is phenomenal. Probably at the age of 28, Jordan Graham has not played enough football for a player of his ability. I think it's around 170 senior games, but that's because of them injuries. I don't think his move to Birmingham was a disaster, but we know it's a step up. He didn't play regularly. I think Lee Bowyer firstly didn't play him all the time,
Just to kind of give some context to that,
but
Lee
but
Bowyer.
you can give me more information, being a blue nose.
Yeah, I think part of the issue that you had was that he was competing with when Blues played with wing backs. He was competing with Maxime Collan, who's probably been one of our most consistent players over the last sort of 5-6 years. Obviously, and I don't think Jordan Graham really sees himself as a wing back.
Absolutely
Um,
doesn't know.
yeah, and John Eustace, I think, has liked that formation as well. And yeah, and then this season, you go to this season even, and where it's tended to work best has been with Tahith Chong on the right wing, and Tahith Chong was obviously talked about as being someone that is going to get in the Man United squad. So obviously that was a really difficult one for
Mhm.
Jordan to break into that. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not saying that this move is likely because I think you've got to be realistic up to a point. But I'm also expecting, in some respects, almost one or two unrealistic signings for Gillingham. I'm kind of half expecting that because of the new ownership and the
Mhm.
investment that's there. And I think because Timothy Dieng, for example, was Player of the Year for Exeter last season.
Yeah, we
And
had
you
this
imagine,
joke like all through January. It was like Gills have announced the signing, and the words "activated release clause" were in the article, and we were like,
yeah.
that's not us. What's happened?
And this is the thing, Matt, because it's like Gillingham are now shopping in different markets, and we don't know whether that market will reach up to someone like Jordan Graham, who could very easily attract some good League One offers. But when you've got a manager in Neil Harris who's got good championship pedigree, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid if he'd got a mid-table championship job. There's that attraction.
Mhm.
Like you say, he's played well at Gillingham before and played his best football there. Neil Harris likes to have at least one sort of classic winger that likes to attack the flank. So stylistically, there's a match. I think there's a lot of areas in which you could say that this could be a reasonable signing. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it's. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility.
Yeah, I'd certainly put it into the marquee bracket if
Mm.
we were to pull it off 100%. I know there's no fee involved because Birmingham have let him go, but in terms of what he's done over the last 3 or 4 years, I'd say it'd be a pleasant surprise. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Second choice is a player that got released by Burton Albion. Played 38 times last season, contributed 7 goals. 7 goals, sorry, that was 5 that he actually scored himself and 2 more assists. Averaged 61 minutes per game, so wasn't always a regular. 250 senior appearances, which at 25 years of age is good going. I think around 100 of them have been at League One level as well. I'm talking about Johnny Smith. Now, I know you said to me on WhatsApp the other day that you thought that would be a decent addition as well,
Yeah.
especially for a club in League Two. But again, I'd imagine there will be at least bottom end League One interest, I think. But again, it's what you said about Neil Harris and what the package and what we can sell to these players to convince them to come to Kent, because
Mm.
you might go, oh, we're only going to be in League Two for 1 or 2 seasons tops, and then you can naturally step up. Or we could say, right, if we don't get promoted this season, then we'll allow you to look elsewhere and that type of thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, just give me your thoughts on Johnny Smith.
Yeah, I would expect Johnny Smith to rank among the best wingers in League Two if Gillingham were to bring him in. I think he's hardworking. I think he's got the ability to either beat a fullback 1-on-1, but he's also unpredictable. He can go either side. He's skillful and agile. Um, has a tendency to drift in and out of games at times, which is probably why he'd be in the conversation to sort of possibly get a League Two move. But he can play on either side as well, so you've got that ability to switch flanks with
Yeah,
someone. Would I necessarily fancy him in a flat 4-4-2 with Sean Williams to protect? I don't know. That would be the one question because he does have those attacking instincts. I would say
I suppose that'd
maybe
be the
four.
same question with Jordan Graham as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point actually, Matt. So whether that would lean you more towards a 4-2-3-1, those kind of signings. Again, Gillingham have got to be very sort of particular about how they go about it. But yeah, I think if it's a 4-2-3-1, I think Johnny Smith will be a fantastic fit.
Couple of other names that we've put down. I think one's been linked to Newport today, actually, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's Enzio Boulderwine, who's been released by Sutton United, and the other one was Harry Anderson, 26-year-old, released by Bristol Rovers. So there are options out there if you look hard enough, I think. And I think the biggest thing, like we've already mentioned, is that Gills have now got this proper structure in place with Kenny Jackett and Andy Hessenthaler being able to go out and watch games all the time and allowing Neil and Dave Livermore to concentrate on the coaching side, which is something that we should have done ages ago. I can't believe that it's taken this long to get it sorted. We tried it with Nicky Shorey and it went horrifically wrong, unfortunately, for one reason or another. Left wing is the next one. Obviously, I think generally we're speaking about players that can play either side, such as the versatility in the modern game. I don't think you get many wingers now that only say, I'm a right winger or I'm a left winger. I think the game's a lot more fluid than, like, you know, the mid-90s when Man United played Ryan Giggs and Andrei Kanchelskis and they didn't move. They just went up and down. My first pick is a player who I'd 100% describe as an enigma. A player that can win a game on his own when he's at it, but at the other end of the scale can go missing. And I think that's probably why his career has been a bit nomadic over the last 10 years. And I'll let you maybe, you know, disagree or embellish on that as well. He's had 10 clubs in a decade after being highly rated at Crystal Palace as a kid, but still manages a goal contribution every 3.2 games from out wide. Been released by MK Dons, still only 27, so still not a bad age. I'm talking about Sully Kaikai.
Yeah, Sully Kaikai has obviously played another one that's played higher up the leagues. He's a creative player as well. You can pose a threat on the counter attack as well, playing some through balls for other players. Can carry the ball quite well. So probably another one that I would say fits into a 4-2-3-1, and I kind of go back to that because you've sort of got to know what you're recruiting for as well. I don't necessarily know where I'd see him fitting into a 4-4-2. I don't know if he's going to be defensively strong enough
So these
to.
are sort of, I think we've sort of looked at maybe if, like we said earlier about Ollie Hawkins, if we converted him as a centre half and then you played a slightly different system, but then you'd still need, then you can maybe play Tom Nichols off of a centre forward and then Jordan Graham's, Johnny Smith's, Sully Kaikai's of this world would come to the fore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I mean, whether if it is the 4-2-3-1, then I think Sully Kaikai is certainly would certainly be a great signing at League Two level. But yeah, I think a lot of it's sort of in the system. If you're going to play 4-2-3, start with 4-2-3-1 in 35 to 40 league games, then it's the kind of signing that you want to be making. But if not, then you've got to think about where they fit in.
Then if it's 4-4-2, I think maybe then the next person that I'm going to mention, and you've already said that you want to talk about him, that's Shane Ferguson. You think
Yes.
he'd be more suited to a 4-4-2 in terms of doing his duty the other way as well? We know there's a big link again, like Ben Thompson to Neil Harris. I think he had 4.5 years under him in South London at the New Den, and very successful 4.5 years as well. I think they were promoted out of League One together.
Mm.
Ferguson's then been promoted out of League One again with Rotherham in recent seasons. 31 now, but still by no means at the end of his career. Played 31 times in the Championship or at Championship level. That's all competitions last season. 3 goals, 5 assists. But again, I wouldn't say he's a regular. And I've forgotten the manager's name. That's going to bug me.
At Rotherham.
Yeah, Matt
Taylor.
Taylor. Sorry, I was getting muddled. Who's the Matt at Sutton?
Oh, Matt Gray.
Matt Gray. That was the two I was getting muddled up. Yeah, 48 minutes per game. So Matt Taylor obviously doesn't play him all the time. But again, that could be a similar type of thing to like Johnny Williams, where you're managing his minutes because he is the wrong side of 30 now. I know Johnny Williams isn't, but he should be. But yeah, another one, huge experience, 350 career appearances. Like I said, 2 promotions already on his CV. Big link with Neil Harris. It's just whether you can persuade Shane Ferguson that dropping down from being semi-regular in the Championship when you're still under contract as well, because that's the thing here. It's not like Jordan Graham, who's a free agent. We'd have to go and buy Shane Ferguson or, sort some deal out where his contract gets mutually terminated. So it'd be, I think there's a lot of stumbling blocks, but if one man potentially could persuade him, could it be Neil Harris?
Yeah, and the Gallinsons as well. I think that
Well, of course, yeah, a bit of that might help as well.
Yeah, of course. I think what you get with Shane Ferguson is the fact that he can play anywhere across the left flank, left back, left wing back, left wing. And obviously, I think I say wing back because there is that possibility that it
Mhm.
gives Harris the option to go with that if he sees fit. It's not something he's been hugely keen on in his career, but he did play that the back end of the 21-22 season, so you never know. So yeah, I think Shane Ferguson would offer that, but also the fact that he knows the Neil Harris system, he knows what Neil Harris expects.
Mhm.
He's someone that Neil Harris trusts. So yeah, I think, and he's going to be very dependable as well in terms of the work rate, in terms of putting good crosses into the box as well for a Hawkins or a Dieng. So yeah, I'd like that signing for sure.
Ferguson, I think for me, like you said about, I can't remember what you said earlier in the show, but it's another one who just comes across as being like a 7 out of 10 every week.
Yeah,
Very rarely has a bad game. Like you say, it does exactly what he says on the tin. You know what you're going to get with Shane Ferguson on a regular basis.
yeah, for sure. And also, I think if you've got someone who can play two or three different positions, it makes changing formation a lot easier. If you
Mm.
feel like you've got to shuffle the pack because of injuries and suspension, or to adjust to individual games and that kind of thing, I think that could be really handy over the course of the season as well.
And like you say, if you've then got a marauding left back that wants to bomb on, you know that you're not going to leave the back door open because Shane Ferguson's intelligent enough to drop in and cover.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Right, centre forwards. Them people that win your titles and win your trophies and invariably win you lots of football matches, and they're the ones that are the hardest to find. I think it's fair to say. I've got this, like I say, this I had a lot. There's plenty of good options out there that have been released as well and that are under contract that are available or maybe not available until you go and ask how much they want. My first pick, and I've got to tell the viewers, before we started recording, Gabe said he didn't know much about this player. So this might be the only player in England and Scotland that Gabe doesn't know a lot about, and I found him.
You've caught me
Um,
out.
his name is Adipo Akinyemi. He plays for Ayr United, 25 years of age, under contract for another year, so it would command a fee. 45 appearances in the Scottish Championship this past season, scored 24 goals and 11 assists in all competitions, which is a phenomenal rate.
Mhm.
87 minutes per game, 4 yellow cards and 1 red, which I think came in the promotion playoff, unfortunately. And I think they ended up losing about 7-0 on aggregate. So not the greatest end to the campaign for Akinyemi, but in terms of output and numbers, there's probably not many better in Britain over the last 9 months.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I'd be kind of again, like you say, it's not someone that I've been able to get some eyes on firsthand. But I think the key thing when it comes to centre forwards is that strength and aerial ability. Because especially if it's just going to be the one up top,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to need that centre forward to be strong in the air because it's not always going to work. The sort of bringing Timothy Dieng further forward, that might work for a few games,
No, of course.
but I think as a permanent solution, you want a centre forward that's going to be strong in the air, and also has a bit of goal scoring ability, but also ideally someone who can run the channels at times and really be a spearhead for the Neil Harris side, like Steve Morrison was in 17-18, where he really led that team from the front. Whether Deepo Akinyemi can do that, I have no knowledge on either way because
No,
he's
sure.
not someone I've seen much of. I suppose that the one name I would throw into the hat would be Josh Imera at Hartlepool
Mm-hmm.
because he's someone who I think is looking for a move further south. I think he's born and raised in London, so
Mm-hmm.
that would suggest that he's looking to go further south. So, and he's had a fantastic season for Hartlepool, so that would be one that would be on my list.
Yeah, he's on my list as well. 26 years of age. Like again, another one that's under contract, so would command a fee, but it's something that Gillingham can look at now because we do
Mm.
have the ability to go and spend rather than just relying on what's left, so to speak, and bargain basements and scraping around. Yeah, I remember him. I remember watching the game at Hartlepool on iFollow because I think it was an international weekend, so he was able to watch that on the Saturday. And I didn't think he was all that day. I think he got bought off after an hour. But it was a horrific game. It was 0-0. It was one of the most 0-0 games I've ever had the misfortune to watch. I thought he was really good at the Priestfield. He was probably their best player. We beat them 2-0 and were fairly comfortable. I think he created his own chance first half, where he
Mm.
bullied the centre half and got a shot off that Glenn Morris saved. I think he hit the post with a glancing header. He was slightly unlucky. He had one disallowed. He was offside, but he was getting in the right areas. He looks to me like a player that can almost do both sides of the number 9, which is what you want if you're going to play a
Mm.
single striker. I think he's got the ability to be a focal point because he's big and he's strong, but then he's also strong enough and athletic enough to stretch defences, to run the channels. And I like a striker that can create his own chances out of nothing. And that was the impression I got with Josh Umirah,
Yeah.
certainly in that 90 minutes at Priestfield, in a very poor Hartlepool side that day. And yeah, 15 goals and an assist last season in a team that got relegated is not to be sniffed at. Still at a decent age. And like you say, locally rated. So it could be something that is an appeal to Josh himself from a personal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you want is a nice range of qualities in the forwards that you bring in. So you've got your old school target man in Ollie Hawkins. You've got someone like a Josh Umirah, I think would be a great signing because he can offer a bit of a physical focal point, but like you say, also that individuality. I would also look, and I think we've talked about this, Matt, bringing in searing pace
Yes,
somewhere
100%.
into the team, whether that's out wide, whether that's up top. Maybe you'd look at a striker who can, maybe a bit of a project striker that's got loads of pace and a little bit raw, possibly, but someone that you can sort of bring into it and maybe bring off the bench
I
from
think we
time to
might
time.
already have him. I think that might be Joe Bode, to be fair, who's 18 and has all the tools. And I see him at the Player of the Year do at the end of April. And I said, he built like an heavyweight, actually, absolute monster of an adult just. He was, honestly, he's ridiculous. The physicality of the bloke is unreal. And he's been very good at a lower level on loan at Hastings a couple of times last season. So I think that's one that would certainly be worth keeping an eye on in the under 23 side. Not
Yeah,
to
and
forget that
and
we've
you know
still got.
what? I'll go back to the point I made earlier in the show, Matt, which is you also want a Jacob OD in there
Mhm.
somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Of
you,
course.
you want someone that's just going to come in and just liven everything up and run in behind and stretch defenses and chase everything and
Yeah.
run around. And I think sometimes you need that bit of energy because as much as we've talked about your Shane Fergusons, your Johnny Williams, or your experienced players that you're going to be pretty confident are going to do the job. You also want someone that's just going to bring in that sense of wonder at playing this level and just wanting to really grab that opportunity and that attitude and that mentality. I think you want that in the
Mhm.
balance somewhere as well. So I think that's a really interesting one.
Yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. I'm not saying he's going to play loads of games, and I think we've got, and then not to forget that we've got Lewis Walker to come back as well. It was,
Mm.
I know people looked at his goal record when he joined. He'd been in Italy, and it wasn't a great standard, and he wasn't, and unfortunately he lived slightly in the shadow of his brother, dare I say it as well, Tyler. Um, he had decent games in the AFL Trophy and the Cup games that he was playing in, and yeah, I thought he was just sort of playing himself into some form before the knee injury came, unfortunately, and he's still only 23, 24, so it's another one that, not in exactly the same sense as Bodo, still a teenager, but 24 is still very young for a centre forward. So I think he's certainly another one that could improve with better players, and he's just not had the opportunity to do that yet because of the knee problem. So there's certainly some there that I'd say might not be at the forefront of the first team straight
Mm.
away, but certainly won't be awful options if we do have injuries and suspensions. And yeah, like you say, everyone likes a project, and no one can beat that feeling of a homegrown hero that comes on and scores a late
Yeah,
winner. That
and
type of
just
Roy
even
the
lifting
Rovers
the
thing.
fans and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
Like
Yeah, if it's a tight
sometimes
game
you
and you think, oh, we're giving him a chance, the crowd gets up, it can pinch a winner or something like that. Yeah, it's very Roy the Rovers, and I think that I think every club really enjoys that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I'd just like to just going back to the Ben Thompson point, do you
Hmm.
think that Gillingham can find a system that's going to get Ben Thompson and that could get Ben Thompson and Nichols simultaneously? Because Nichols was brilliant in the second half of the season,
Hmm.
but it would be interesting how you'd kind of make that one work.
I think you'd have to play. I think you'd have to play four. I suppose you could play Nichols as the 10, just off of a striker, with, like you say, Thompson as an orthodox centre midfielder next to a Williams or a Dieng.
Mm.
But there'd be nice problems to have, wouldn't they? That's the thing. It'd be
Yeah.
problems because we've got not too many good players, but because we've got nice choices everywhere. Whereas I think the first half of the season it was problems because we could, oh, he's got to play again, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I know
So
what you
yeah,
mean.
it'd be a great problem, and I've said all along, and I've said it to you on WhatsApp, and when I've come on your EFL debate show, and Neil Harris won't have any excuses next season.
Mm.
Can't complain about budget, can't complain about players, can't complain about having someone else's squad. So expectation will organically grow, and I think that's an exciting thing, and I think Neil will thrive on that.
Mm.
Yeah, and if we've got issues where we're struggling to get Tim Dieng and Tom Nichols and Ben
Yeah.
Thompson into the same side, then I think we'll be in a pretty decent place.
Yeah, and also the other thing is maybe Sean Williams isn't going to start 40 plus league games. Maybe
I think
he's
I think Ethan Coleman's probably the natural successor there from what I've
oh
seen. He's
yeah.
been very good. Started at Stockport in that 0-0 draw. played the last few games because Willow missed the last 3 or 4 because he had to have a minor knee operation. So yeah, I think it'll be something that Neil looks to hopefully be able to wrist and rotate, Sean.
And maybe Ethan
37.
Coleman might actually be able to cover more ground. So if you want to make a 4-4,
He's a
full flat
massive,
4-4-2 work.
massive unit in terms of he's very long, he's very rangy, he's got huge stride on him. So he'd be a player that naturally gets about the park really well as well. And I think he's not going to create you loads of chances, but he's more than competent with the ball at his feet that I've seen over the last 3 months. And yeah, a good age for a central midfielder. Can only learn off of good players like Timmy Dieng and Sean Williams. So yeah, I think he's certainly another. That's the thing. I think this is why it's so important, Gabe, that we get this under 23 side sorted out because there's plenty
Yeah.
that have fallen into that sort of in between bracket at the moment that are maybe not regulars all the time but need to play games.
And that could do wonders for Jacob Bode because if he's playing in the under 23 side over the course of the season, it's a better chance for Neil Harris to have a look at him, maybe drop him in, maybe give him the odd starting cup games, maybe put him on the bench, give him 5 minutes, does well in that, give him 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden he can become part of the first team squad.
That's
Whereas
it.
if you send him out on loan for half a season, you don't really have that option. So
I think we was okay because we had it because he was going down to such a level that we could still have it under a dual registration. I think so he could still come back and play for us as well because it. Yeah, I think because the level he was going to, I think once you get to like National League South, then you can't do it. But the level he was going to meant he could still play games for Gills. But yeah, totally agree with the sentiment. In terms of alternatives, after O'Meara and Akinyemi, I've written down Dan Ege. I think he's in negotiations with Crew Alexander. I think there'll be plenty of interest. Sam
I
Smith,
think he's
another
going to
one.
leave, to be honest.
I think he'll definitely leave. Yeah, 100%.
I remember Dana J from sort of probably earlier in his career when he was this kind of really exciting raw talent that was kind of running at everyone and sort of playing a bit more off the cuff. And what we've probably seen from him at Crew this season is he's actually been a bit more of a focal point because who do they have? They sometimes had Chris Porter last season, who was sort of the out and out striker, and Ajay sometimes played wing back or different positions that didn't. But actually, this season he's kind of been a focal point for Crew, and he's actually done really probably better than I'd maybe expected from it, and he's grabbed a few goals as well, and he's still got a bit of the
It's
directness. So
interesting
I
you
think,
say that because I looked at his stats and he's played 23 times through the middle as a number 9 this season.
yeah,
And he'd only played 33 through the times through the middle in the rest of his career. So yeah,
yeah,
it's
because
certainly
at
certainly an
Oxford,
evolution of the player.
yeah, so at Oxford, he, I think Carl Robinson liked him coming off wide areas and sometimes coming off the bench as well. So he was never really the focal point for them. And even sort of going back to earlier in his career, I can remember watching him at Coventry, where you thought he clearly had the raw physical attributes, but he was very raw at that point. Whereas now, I think he's got a maturity to his game. So to have him at League Two level. I think that would be a huge coup. So another one that I'd probably put in a similar category to Yamera or possibly Akinyemi, depending on what people think of his all-round game. Someone that can bring the individuality, bring the goal scoring, bring that bit of something special, but also be a hold-up person as well. So I think any of those three strikers, I think you'd be really happy with.
Yeah, and he's done really well. 16 goals and 5 assists, and he's averaged 86 minutes per game, so he's barely missed anything at all. Just quickly, because I'm conscious of time and you and obviously want to go and enjoy the rest of your evening as well. Alternate picks. Aidan O'Brien, because of the Neil Harris link, the loan from last season. Tyler Walker, maybe his brother can have a word, but I think he'll probably go League One in fairness. Cole Stockton's an interesting one, but geographically it probably wouldn't make much sense at 29 years of age as well. And the other one that obviously is doing the rounds on social media at the moment is Alfie May. But I know Charlton have made a bid. I think, again, it'd probably fall into it'd certainly be a marquee signing, but I think my gut instinct says he probably goes League One.
Yeah, I League One or Wrexham.
Yeah, League One or Wrexham, but then that'd be interesting because is he going to play there every week? Because you're not going to drop Paul Mullin, and they've still got Ollie Palmer in the equation as well. But yeah, I'd imagine the bank balance would take a nice bonus every 4 weeks, which might persuade him to relocate to Wales. But all the noise is coming out of certainly from some Cheltenham people that I spoke to in January were that he wants to move closer to home. So Charlton certainly fits the bill in terms of
Interesting.
staying higher up.
Oh yeah, is he? Has he got links sort of round?
Born in Hyde, so he's up the road from us, and
Oh
I
right,
think his parents live down the road from the valley. So I'd say that would probably make them slight favourites at the moment.
interesting. Okay.
Gabe, it's been a real pleasure as always.
Oh,
I really
no, I've
enjoyed
loved
picking
it.
your
We need
brains.
to do more of these. I've
It's flown
loved
by.
coming on the
Yeah, I
show.
definitely want to get you on more regularly next season, like I say. If you're not following Gabe on Twitter, his handle's in the description at the bottom of this show. Go and give him a follow because anything and everything you need to know about EFL goes through this man. Watch his EFL debate shows. They're brilliant. He gets some wonderful guests on there. He gets me on there as well. But, you know, in general, he gets some brilliant guests.
Don't do yourself down, Matt.
Thanks as always for watching. Please keep liking, subscribing, doing everything you do because, as I say, this channel is absolutely nothing without the interaction of others. We will be back next week for another Gills in the Blood Chats 2. I'm just finalising the details of that one. But until then, I hope you enjoy your weekend. And up the Gills. Where's that gone?